Good evening, everybody, and welcome. My name is Sabir, pronouns he, him, and I run events here at the Strand. Before we launch into a discussion of Keisha Bush's debut novel, No Heaven for Good Boys, I'd like to share a little bit of history about the Strand. The Strand was founded in 1927 by Benjamin Bass over on 4th Avenue's Book Row. Stretching from Union Square to Astor Place, Book Row gradually dwindled from 48 bookstores until, after 94 years, the Strand is a sole survivor, now run by third generation owner Nancy Bass Wyden. We want to thank all of you for your support. Without our loyal community of book lovers, we wouldn't be here today, and we are so appreciative of it. Tonight, we are thrilled to have with us Keisha Bush for the launch of her novel No Heaven for Good Boys. Keisha Bush was born and raised in Boston, Massachusetts. She received her MFA in creative writing from the New School, where she was a Riggio Honors Teaching Fellow and a recipient of an NSPE Dean Scholarship. After a career in corporate finance and international development that brought her to live in Dakar, Senegal, she decided to focus full time on her writing. A longtime East Harlemite, she's writing out the second lockdown in Tulsa, Oklahoma. Joining Keisha in conversation is Nane Ekua Brew-Hammond. Brew-Hammond is the author of Powder Necklace, which Publishers Weekly called a winning debut. Named to the Africa 39 list of writers with the potential and talent to define trends in the development of literature from Sub-Saharan Africa and the diaspora, her short fiction was included in the anthology Africa 39. Her work also appears in Everyday People, The Color of Life, New Daughters of Africa, and Accra Noir, among others. Forthcoming from Brew-Hammond are a children's picture book, a novel, and an anthology. Brew-Hammond was a 2019 Edward F. Albee Foundation Fellow, a 2018 Ake Arts and Book Festival guest author, a 2017 Aspen Ideas Festival Scholar, a 2016 Hedgebrook Writer-in-Residence, and a 2015 Rhode Island Writers Colony Writer-in-Residence. Every month, Brew-Hammond co-leads a writing fellowship whose mission is to write light into the darkness. So, without further ado, please join me in welcoming Keisha Bush and Nane Ekua Brew-Hammond to the stage. Sorry about that.
Hi.
Hi, Keisha, congratulations.
Thank you so much, Nene. How are you?
Good, thank you. This is so exciting. Your book is fantastic. So I just want to dive right in because there's so many different things that you mind that we need to, get into tonight. So first of all, I would love it if you could just give us like an overview of what the book is about. For everyone who hasn't read it yet.
All right. So No Heaven for Good Boys is about a young boy named Ibrahima who is sent to a Dara, which is a school of the Quran. And the way the Dara works is only boys, for the most part. Girls also go to the Dara, but to live at the Dara, only boys would go. Do go. And the point of the Dara and this kind of tutelage is to learn the Quran, to get closer to God. And to memorize the Quran, it takes about 2 to 5 years. So the assumption is that a boy will be a disciple of this teacher called a Marabu for 2 to 5 years. And once he is able to recite the Quran from memory, he can go back to his family. And part of this sort of, it's almost like a monkhood, right? For children, though, for young boys. And part of this tutelage is you go out and you beg. Marabu teachers cannot make money, right? They can't sell anything. And so they send the boys out for 2 to 3 hours a day to learn humility, because men of God can feel as if they are higher than lay people. And so to ensure that they are humbled, they're sent out to beg for 2 to 3 hours. They bring the money back, they give it to their teacher, who in turns is offering them this special, bless you, offering them this special teaching. And the problem that is happening in Senegal is many teachers are abusing this, and instead of teaching the boys the Quran, they send the boys out for 12 to 18 hours a day to beg, and the boys have a quota to bring back. And so it's being abused. You know, this very old tradition and power, you know, within the religion is being abused. And I write a fictional account of what I experienced and saw, kind of witnessed, more like witnessed in Senegal when I was living there. Because when I returned to the US, I could not get the Talibé, which is what these boys are called. I couldn't get the Talibé out of my heart. I couldn't like eject them. They were just, they're here to stay.
Well, they're in our, like anyone who reads it, they're going to be in our hearts too. Your main character, Ibrahima, Etienne, all those boys, it just like rips your heart out. But you know what I think that you do so well in this book is that you, I mean, it's not a sob story. It's a very kind of it's just, you tell it with like a reporter's eye. Like, you know, you just really give us the facts, but with all of this lush detail, and you weave in these fantastical elements, and the story gets more and more. It sort of starts off very calm and sweet and serene. You're in the beach and like the village of Senegal, in Salulu, and then it gets crueler and darker and starker. As the story, you know, ramps up. So I wanted to know a little bit about like how you approach like writing it. How did you choose that style of, you know, to write this story?
It was interesting because I was so passionate about wanting to share with the world what I had experienced or seen in Senegal with the boys. And I remember when I was in Dakar, I would see these children around, you know, begging for money, and they had their tomato cans. They all use these. I mean, it's a great recycling sort of program because Senegalese food is tomato based. It's heavily tomato based. Like in Djeboujen, they use tomatoes in Djeboujen. In Chou and Mafe is delicious. It's a tomato base with peanut. Oh man, and like there's meat in it, and you put it on rice. So there's just tomatoes in traditional Senegalese food, which leaves the country with like an overabundance of big and small tomato cans, these red tomato cans. And so the Taliban use these cans to collect alms, to collect their money. This is when they're begging for food to eat. That's what if they get extra, that's where they'll store it throughout the day. And so the tomato can is like a character in itself in the story. But I was so fired up about the Taliban that I think the original draft, I wrote it like a reporter, kind of like nonfiction. And that wasn't working, so I went back and I rewrote the novel in between like 2011 and 2012 at the New School. And it was in that revision that instead of me kind of telling the world about it, I went in and let Ibrahima tell his story. And I think what happens is because I'm using fiction as a vehicle. I'm using fiction as a vehicle to convey a nonfiction story. So everything, Dakar itself, Dakar, Senegal, Dakar is, for those of you that may not know, Dakar is Senegal's capital city. So think like New York City, right? Of New York or Boston. right, in Massachusetts. So everything about Dakar in the book is nonfiction. You could take the book and walk around Senegal, and the streets that I talk about in the book are laid out the way they are laid out in Senegal. The zoo that opens the first chapter is a real zoo. And what's funny is I never went to the zoo when I was in Dakar, but there were like all these jokes about it. Like the animals are so sad and they look hungry, which is why I never went, because I was like, I don't want to see animals, you know? But when I was writing the book, I wanted the boys to do something fun like that kids would do. And when their teacher, Marabou, goes away, those are opportunities for them to be children. And you get those moments throughout the book. I mean, I know I would do that. You know, I'm like, if my cruel teacher was away for 2 weeks, what would I do? I would go to the zoo. I would go to the beach. You know, I would go do other stuff than like working. And so everything, so Dakar itself is nonfiction in the book. And I think that's what gives it that kind of different feeling, because I take Dakar and I try to portray it as truthful as possible. And then I take the Talibé, who also exists, but I use these two fictional characters and the people around them who are also fictional to convey this larger story.
Yeah.
So
you definitely feel, you know, just with Dakar, like and Salulu, you definitely feel like you're moving through those streets, you're entering those homes, you know, you're lying on that mat, like you give such rich details that you smell. I mean, you can smell it, you can hear it, you can feel it. You know, I think you do such a fantastic job of that. But then you add these like magical, fantastical elements, which are a really big part of the story. And I wanted to know more about like your decision to weave that in.
Okay. So it's so interesting because when I was writing the book, and even before the book came out, I didn't see that those aspects of the book as magic realism at all. I saw them as like part of Senegalese culture. You know, and some of the things that I actually experienced, like I experienced going to a medicine man. All of my Senegalese friends were like, "Why did you do that?" And I was like, "Because I did not know where the person was bringing me." He never said. I thought we were going to the store. I mean, we did go to the store, and on the way back home, they were like, "Oh, I need to go see a friend," and I was like, "Oh." You know, the naive American, you're like, oh, okay, no problem. And we went through a bush, like some hedges, and it was just like this whole other world that I had never seen off of the main road, which is Rhode in the book. And I was like, where am I? So then after we started to go, I was afraid. So I wasn't gonna leave her. Anyway, long story short, like, you know, I've seen a medicine man with the quarry shells and, you know, spitting into the basket and saying things, and, you know, there's smoke all around us. And I'm just like, I'm a curious person, so I'm definitely not leaving now. I want to see what happens to the end, you know? And so, and even within the Black American community, you know, dreams are huge, you know? Very big, and there is sort of this mysticism that is practiced that dates back to Africa. And my grandmother herself, who is from, you know, my mom's side is from Honduras. My grandmother practiced, you know, voodoo. So, and that was just normal to me growing up. So I'm just like, magic realism, this is real stuff. And be afraid. I don't mess with it. Yeah. So that's how it ended up being interwoven. It was just so natural for me. with things that I saw and experienced and talked to with friends in Dakar. And so for me, that's part of the nonfiction.
Yeah.
You know? And then you come to the Western world and people are like, oh, that's magic realism, you know, and I'm like, oh, okay. But what's cool about it is it can be what it wants to be for everyone.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I didn't write it to keep people out. I wrote in a way to try to pull people from different aspects and different parts of the world and different experiences to pull folks in, and to see themselves there.
Yeah.
A lot of what Ibrahima sees, some of the things that he does are things that I saw. So I gave him my eyes.
Yeah.
Times, and then gave him a more childlike response to it. So a perfect example is in the book, the Dakar University students riot. You know, they're it's a riot, but what you know, they're protesting.
Yeah.
But it's kind of riotous, I'll be honest. And they attack passersby. And the reason that they're rioting in the book is the real reason why they were rioting and protesting in Dakar when I was there. And, you know, I was trying to go to the pastry shop, the patisserie, to get like quiche.
And quiche, a funny thing happened on the way to get some quiche. Yeah.
And I didn't know what the big booms were about. So I was just like, I'm going to go get a quiche. I need some good lunch. And what I saw was, it looked like a war zone on the Rue de Wacom. And I was like, nobody was out. And I saw all these rocks in the road. And I saw a Hummer show up. All these military, you know, the Senegalese military roll out of the car, or tumble out of the Hummer. And then a bazooka, I've never seen a bazooka in real life. And they put this bazooka down and they shot 3 fireballs on campus, because they're not allowed on campus anymore because they beat the students up back in the 70s.
Wow.
So the president is like, no military on campus. And I was just like a little kid, like, oh my God. And then they saw me and they're like, what are you doing? You know, in French. And then they're like, allez, allez. And I was just like, oh no. But like, you know, for Ibrahima and Etienne, they're caught in it, right? Just by accident, like I was. But then instead of them running away, they're even more curious. They do what kids do. They hide behind a car and watch a bit more until the tear gas is released and the wind throws it back on them, and then they run.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
But yeah, and then, you know, it's just like, why is this happening? And it's just so much of the book is that.
Yeah, those boys go through a lot in that city. They see so much. I'm like, oh my God. It's like, oh, my heart. I want to take a minute to just welcome everyone here. There are people from France, from Brookline, Massachusetts, from Melbourne, Australia, from Inwood, New York, Jackson Heights. I think I saw Peekskill. This is so dope. What an amazing gathering. This is so lovely.
Yeah.
And I feel like at some point, maybe you should prepare to read a little something to share with everyone. But I don't want to put you on the spot this minute. I want to ask you some more questions because one of the things that I wondered was, as I was reading it, I was like, wow, you really like you're depicting the Senegalese culture. It's with so much nuance. And I wonder, you know, how was that difficult for you coming in from, you know, America? How did you approach kind of, you know, getting inside the culture and understanding it and feeling confident enough to write about it?
Well, I'm by nature a curious person, and to get people to understand a little more, when I was in Senegal, I had never imagined ever being a writer. You know, I had come from the corporate sector, and then ended up in the arts sector. And then from there, and this is before I started working for an NGO. I didn't go to Senegal working for an NGO. I went to Senegal to get away from America. I'll just be honest. I needed a break. And I was just like, Africa, go like reconnect and learn. And so I was just really open. And I had a friend who is Senegalese, and he was living in New York. And I had been in the Gambia first. That I originally went to the Gambia, and that wasn't so great. And that was great and not great. Like, it was just interesting. And I said I wasn't going to put up with what was going on there. And so I went to Dakar, Senegal. And I stayed with my friend's mother for 2 weeks, loved it, went back to the Gambia, tried to make it work. And, you know, some unfortunate things happened. And I ended up going back to Dakar. I decided to move to Dakar. And I stayed with my friend's family again, with his mom. And at one point when I was staying with her and his sister, and then his other sister, and both his sisters spoke perfect English because they lived in the States, had gone to school, and had returned home. And I call a lot of my Senegalese friends who had like gone to middle, you know, who had gone to school, who spent so many years in the US or in France or in Canada, and who had returned home. I called them my Senegalese expats because they were trying to balance their individuality and their globalness of living abroad and trying to come back home and sort of reintegrate with what was expected of them within Senegalese culture. And at one point when I was living with my friend's mom, we were eating, you know, we eat as a family out of one big platter on the floor, and I had my place, and I was helping to clean up afterwards, and they were like, Keisha, you're a Senegalese woman, you know, like you know how to do everything. And I was like, I watched you all, and I know how to clean up after dinner. I know the steps to take, you know, and I even have Ibrahima and Etienne do that in the book, where a maid comes and puts out a tablecloth for them, a table mat, and they eat. And then afterwards, like, what do? You pick it up, you fold it, you brush the rice off, all of these things. And I had like American friends out there, American expats, British expats, French friends, Swiss, Korean, Chinese. The bus company out there was Tata from India, and it runs on point, better than the metro in New York City. And I would complain about that when I came back to Manhattan. Like, the bus in Senegal works better than this. We need Tata. Like, so I think what happened is, like, my friends were from also all over Africa. I had friends from Cote d'Ivoire, you know, Ivory Coast, Mali, South Africa, Namibia, Eritrea, Ethiopia, Kenya, Ghana, Cameroon. And I had friends who, again, like the Senegalese expats who had lived abroad, but I also had girlfriends who hadn't finished 6th grade and had never been out of Senegal, you know, out of Dakar. And yet all these people just sort of embraced me because I didn't come with a preconceived notion. I just came with this, like, tell me about who you are. And I had no access to books out there, English-based books, because everything was in French. So I would read some French books because my reading had gotten better, but I'm a voracious reader. And so I think because I didn't have access to just buy books like I wanted, I wanted to know about everybody. That's how I got the fill of my stories. Like, tell me your story. I would have great conversations in French, broken French with like taxi drivers, you know, like I learned a lot from just everyone. I was just like, and I'm not fluent in Wolof, which is like one of the main local languages, but I know enough I'm a jokester. I know enough Wolof to make people think I'm fluent in Wolof, if this makes sense.
Yes.
So I can negotiate really well. And I learned Senegalese female like behaviors and the way and the little ticks because I could get what I wanted when I negotiated if I knew those ways, if that makes sense. So like trying to negotiate with a taxi man to go downtown, he's like, oh, you're American. I'm going to charge you double the price. And I'm like, no. And I tell him, I know the Senegalese price. Je connais le prix Senegalese, huh? You know? And so I ended up, and those kind of nuances would always get them to be,
look at you twice, like, oh, okay, I can't take her. Yeah,
I'm like, the Senegalese price is $800 from here to downtown, which is cool. I told him I'm not asking for the Senegalese price, but I will pay $1,000. I'll give you 200 extra.
Yeah.
But you need to be satisfied with that. So like, I actually got really good. I developed personally in that way as a person. And so like those nuances are in the book because they're actually in me now.
Yeah.
They're such a part of me.
Yeah, when you said A, I was thinking to myself, I was like, you cannot go to West Africa without knowing A or Ish or
yes.
Those are like full vocabulary, right? And they mean like a million different things depending on your intonation, your body language.
Yes, they absolutely do. They absolutely do. And I just, just everyday interaction and with the Taliban, I was more, we got to know each other, like groups of boys got to know me just because it was on my commute home and On the Run, which is kind of a food depot and a gas station that attracts a lot of local people and international people and students because they serve burgers and pizza. And there was like a set group of Taliban boys who were always there, and they would come in the evening, and they just learned me by we learned to recognize each other. Mm-hmm. And I was banana girl for them, because when I originally went, I was kind of broke. I was only living off of $200 a month at one point. And my rent was $140. Yeah. So I was making $60 for food and transportation to go teach.
Wow.
For a month, and bananas were cheap. You can get 10 bananas for $2. So they would see me and just like firecracker went off. I had like 10 to 15 boys screaming, banana, 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 banana. And they would like rush me and rush up to my, legs because they're kind of short. And there was always like a little 3 or 4-year-old caught in the like mix of all these bodies. And he's like, wee, like, me too. Yeah. And, I would buy them bananas and just like interact with them, because they're children.
Yeah. Yeah. I would love it if you could read something and give people a taste, because I want to ask you a couple more questions, but I would love it if people could get like a taste of this book.
All right, hold on. It's right here.
Yeah, and this audience, I wish I could see your faces, but I see Englewood, New Jersey's in the house, and gosh, wow. I know Oakland's in the house.
All right, so, I can just read from the first chapter.
Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
Okay. I'll read like, I don't know, 2 pages or so. All right. Ibrahima slumps against the trunk of an ancient baobab tree and sets his red tin can between his feet. The tree's gnarled, flowerless branches twist and bend over a wide, empty road, with only a single white line running down its middle. It is late morning and the road is quiet, free of people, traffic, houses, or businesses. Just dry, parched earth stretching as far as the eye can see, with a scattering of baobab trees. Above, the sky is overcast and gray, but the air is warm. While his cousin Etienne and the other boys from the Dara debate how to spend the afternoon, Ibrahima's eyelids hang heavy and his thoughts drift to his mother. The warmth of her touch, the sound of her voice, and the scent of her skin exist now only in memory. Just as his daydream is about to take full possession of his consciousness, a ball of fire streaks towards him, landing on his knee. His slack muscles spring tight and his almond eyes stretch wide as teacups. The apparition is a tiny red bird cocking its head as if to get a good look at him. Not knowing whether to shoo the bird away or call for his cousin to witness the spectacle before him, he watches quietly and hopes that it is some kind of fairy, like the one his sisters told him would come for a tooth beneath his pillow. Fairy godmother? Ibrahima squeaks in Wolof. The creature shakes its small head. You can understand me? The bird moves its head up and down. Ibrahima's mouth forms a circle and his eyebrows arch. Are you here to help me? The bird tilts its head back and sings a melody that the boy has heard before. He sees his village, Salaloo, and his mother flipping small pieces of lamb on the grill. His sisters chase one another, pulling the pigtails they can catch, and his father carries a box of vegetables from their farm. The image of home gives way to the small red bird's fleeing tail feathers. Ibrahima's eyes linger on his knee where the bird had landed. Then he turns towards his cousin, who stands beneath another tree several feet away out of earshot. Etienne, did you see? Ibrahima yells, jumping to his feet. Etienne turns away from the conversation he's having with Abdullah and Fatik, two other boys from their house. See what? Etienne shouts back. The bird on my knee. He could understand when I talked. And I'll end there. Just real quick.
Well, so I want to dive in a little bit because as just back on your sort of read and the way you depict Senegalese society, and maybe a good place to start is spirituality and religion, because something that is sort of, again, woven together, it are, you know, the traditional religion, and then Islam, because obviously, like, they're in a Dara, and you know, they're there to learn the Quran, and this is an Islamic tradition and practice. So, but it's all woven together. You know, when someone's sick, they go to the medicine man.
Yes.
You know, and you know, even the Marabu is like, you know, doing that. So just would love to kind of, you know, hear more about, you know, how you kind of put that together in the book.
Well, I feel like it's so interwoven in Senegalese culture. You know, with conversations that I had with friends while I was in Dakar, what I ended up learning when I first went to, I would say, West Africa, one of the first things is that, you know, many hundreds of years ago, when the Arabs were moved into Northern Africa from the Middle East, what we call the Middle East now, they then from Northern Africa came down, right, to like Central and West Africa for slaves. And, you know, like Christianity, the original laws of Christianity, Islam has laws also. And one of those laws are that you cannot enslave another Muslim. And so the easy way, the simplest way to eradicate slavery from the North Arabs was just to convert to Islam. But what I love is that, like, West Africa and Senegal, at least, didn't give up their traditional beliefs. They just sort of added it on. And you see that in everyday life in Dakar. You'll see a woman in hijab. You will see traditional garb, you know, the bubu with the foulard, the scarf on the head. But then you'll see a woman right next to those two women who is wearing jeans and a t-shirt or really nice shirt. And no one is made to feel like, oh, look at you and you're traditional, you're so outdated, or look at you, you heathen with your Western clothes. Like, these women they change their dress themselves. The woman who you see in the traditional garb might wear, you know, her jeans on like Wednesday, you know, or like Saturday evening when she's going out. So like, that was something that was really stark, really jumped out at me, because I feel like we live in a world that is so quick to judge one another, to say that you're not cool enough or you're not dressed nice enough, you know, to be within this circle. And here's an entire country of people who are just like, yeah, you can do what you want, you know, and it's accepted throughout the entire culture. And there's that flexibility with it. And, you know, in Dakar, there's a very small Christian community, like 2%, 2-3%. And then there's like 1 to 2% that only practice traditional, which, you know, I would assume those are the medicine men. That's just my opinion. And then it's like 90 something percent Muslim. But, you know, when I was going through Dakar, like, I saw a Korean church in Senegal, and I was just like, hold on. I was like, you know, like, I was like, wow, you know, like, this Korean community is here and they're not going anywhere. And I ended up having a Korean student for English, which was really awesome. And I got like the best kimchi in Dakar, because they cooked it at home and invited me, and I was like, yes. But there's just like this sort of like co-living that happens and just feels very natural. And that's why it's like that in the book. Because that's how Senegal is.
Yeah, one of the things that I also wanted to, or I noticed and wanted to ask you about was just that as Senegalese as the story is, as African as the story is, you definitely feel that Western influence of living in this city of Dakar. You know, you have, and even in Salulu, just because Maimouna references like television shows like The Addams Family and The Cosby Show, and just sort of like, you can't, it's like this inescapable globalism that is part and parcel of this very African experience. You know, the NGO workers and you know, the on the run factory and the burgers and the chips and everything. So just wanted to kind of, you know, if you could just talk a little bit about how you, especially coming as an African, like how you, I mean, as an African-American, not African-American, how you kind of, you know, distanced yourself from it enough to be able to kind of look at, you know, the foreigners, if you will, and write that into the story.
Again, when I say like my experience in Senegal was just like constantly discovering new things. So one day I was hanging out with my girlfriend Mommy, right? Senegalese, beautiful Senegalese woman who Maimouna, the mother, is sort of fashioned after. Like, if there is somebody who Maimouna looks like, it is my girlfriend Mommy. And Mommy had only gone to school to like 6th grade because she had to stop going to school to work as a seamstress to help support her family financially. And we just we got along so well. Like, that was one of my besties out there. And then I had another girlfriend who I was besties with, and she was from Guinea, Ani. But Maimouna, one day Maimouna and I were hanging out at a club, and, you know, another Senegalese woman walks by in like very thin, very slinky red outfit, old makeup, you know, because the makeup is imported from France, and so it often tends to be expired and the wrong tone.
I caught that shade you threw.
Yeah. And the women don't even need makeup. Their skin is so flawless, but, you know, like, it's being fancy, it's being Western. And as the woman walked by, my girlfriend mommy was like, oh, I was like, oh, you know, she kind of reminds me of the woman from the mom from the Addams Family. But I didn't say the name. Oh, I said the Addams Family, and then mommy said the name. And I was just like, hold up. How do you know that? And she was like, I grew up watching the Addams Family and Bill Cosby and A Different World, girl. Yes. I was going to go to college, you know, in Washington, D.C. And, you know, what I realized is one of the reasons why she and we were getting along, like we got along so well, is because our cultural references, although she was born and raised in Senegal and had never left, her cultural references were the same as mine from like where I was.
Sure, yeah.
Yeah, I was born and raised in Boston. And so like, that was important for me to bring into the story also, to show that like this idea of like Africa or Africans, that they're not so far from us. Like we have the same cultural references. Dallas was huge in Senegal back in the day when it was huge in America. Like, I mean, I was a kid, so I wasn't into Dallas, but like Dallas is a thing when you go to Senegal. And at one point, like when Whitney Houston was really big, all of the women had Whitney Houston haircuts. Like it was short, like the Whitney Houston do back when in the 70s, when the civil rights movement and the you know, the Black Panther, and you had Angela Davis, the women, I saw pictures of my friends' parents, and they all had big afros, you know? So like, you know, Senegal being there opened my world up in a way that I think I became a more global citizen. And I realized that everyone outside of America is more global than we are. And I wouldn't have done Senegalese people in Dakar, or anyone in Africa any justice if I didn't bring that sort of globalization that exists there on the page. I think it's really easy to just say, oh, look at this one aspect, like these boys and what they're dealing with. But this was more about like, look at this global world in which we are all living. And these children are also my children. Yeah. They're our children. Yeah. Even though they're in Senegal and even though they come from poor families, look at how big the world is, even the world in which they live in. So there's literally no reason why the Taliban should be dealing and experiencing and having to suffer what they're suffering, because we are a global village.
Yeah, yeah.
And I try and I hope that the book opens that up to readers who may have never seen Senegal as like, you know, or any country in Africa as like just you know, it's just right over the river.
Yeah, it's not hermetically sealed off. And boys get it. At their young age, they know like, yeah, let's hang out by like where the foreigners will be. We'll get more money, and that's really clear. But we are now at the Q&A portion. I'm so excited to open it up to everyone, the 90 people that are here, which is so awesome. Yeah. Please, if anyone has any questions, please, this is, the floor is open to ask. So please fire away. And while we're waiting for questions, I wanted to ask you, did you see any sort of specific similarities between African-American culture and the Senegalese culture that like kind of stood out to you?
Well, you know, what's interesting is when I first went to Dakar, one of the first words I learned was how to say yes, right? And yes is wow. I was like, wait a second, W-O-W means yes and Wolof, you know? They're like, wow, wow, you know, yes, yes. So like, here is a language lesson for everybody who is here. Like every time you say wow, like wow, just literally you are saying yes in Wolof. And it was just really interesting. There's so much American culture. I remember walking down the street and like this young Senegalese guy was like, "Hey ma," and I was just like, "What?" You know, like, hey, shorty. That's what he said. He was like, "Hey, shorty," in English.
Yeah.
And I was just like, hold up. But I do. We Black American people are not. We're not as far from our African roots as we may think we are. Like, I just the way Senegalese people moved. I found Dakar was just full of entrepreneurship, and energy and fashion. Music is huge in Senegal. And I don't bring as much music into the book because for children, they're hungry and they're focused on
they're not thinking so much about that.
Yeah.
Boys in particular.
Absolutely. You know, they're more focused on food and playing soccer and like being a boy. But what I think, which is very true for the Black American community here in the US, and also for just poor children everywhere, that I highlight or is really important to me, and I try to highlight it in the book, is like how fragile access to education is.
Yeah.
You know, Maimuna, the mother in the book of Ibrahima, has 3 daughters, her and her husband. You know, Ibrahima has 3 sisters, and their father is just like, my girls are going to school. You know, and at one point in the book, you know, Ibrahima and these Taliban boys they don't have access to education. They're not even being taught the Quran. And at one point, there's a scene where I really try to highlight that, where Ibrahima sees some school kids, and the school kids are they're in a yard behind bars, right? And in Black American culture, bars are like the prison system, you know, not having access. And I juxtapose it, like in this story, those bars are safety, privilege, you know, food, education, and Ibrahim is left on the outside of that.
Yeah.
They can't enter that. And so there are a lot of connections, I guess, for me in the book that relate back to like the Black American community and what communities of color struggle with here in the States, you know, like access to equal education, access to education. Yeah.
Well, we have a ton of great questions. So the first question is, you mentioned, this is from Leah. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. Leia's asking, you mentioned the littlest boy in your interactions with the kids. Was there a spark point or a particular child who captured your heart or imagination and imagination?
There were 2 instances. There was a day where I had more money at this point. I was working. I was teaching a lot. This is before I started working with Oxfam, but I was teaching all over the place. So I was making like almost $1,000, $2,000 a month. You know, so I was flush with money because my rent was only $140. Remember, I didn't move.
Yeah.
I saw 2 boys. No, I saw one boy who came up to me. He asked me for money. There was a man making egg sandwiches. He had a stand. He was always there. And so I asked him if he wanted an egg sandwich. He said yes. We go over to it. And while that was happening, someone kept peeking at us. And, you know, I have a stranger danger kind of thing myself. So I'm like, who is peeking at us? Like, what is going on? I'm about to go over there. Like, I need to protect myself. And it turned out it was the boy's younger brother. And I assumed they were young, he was his younger brother because they looked exactly alike, but this little boy was a baby. And the baby was afraid of me, which broke my heart. And they were clean. And they looked like they had just come to Dakar, fresh from their parents. And the little one was terrified. And I was heartbroken. And they had these big almond eyes. And they were just beautiful children. And then there was another young boy, a whole bunch of boys, a whole different group. They were at a very busy intersection. I approached them because I was in the area and I was just like, hey, do you all want some food? Let's go to the boutique. And to cross this busy intersection, I put my hand down and the baby took it. Oh. As dirty as his little hand was, and he only had like no clothes on, just an oversized t-shirt. But he was young enough to take my hand to cross the street without me prodding him. And there were those moments, those moments that just like the ache and the hurt in my own stomach just could not go away. I couldn't throw that away. And that is actually what triggered those instances the most, triggered Etienne and Ibrahima.
Yeah.
Those first two boys, because Etienne looks out for Ibrahima, just like that young boy was trying to protect his younger brother, with the sandwich.
Yeah. We have a question from Jacqueline Woodson on Facebook. She's asking, what are your thoughts about the Own Voices movement and writing outside of one's culture or nationality or religion or race, etc.?
Huge. So just a little backstory. I grew up Jehovah's Witness. Then my mom divorced when I was 6 and started seeing an old friend and married a man who practiced Islam. And we did a soft conversion. So throughout my pre-teens and early teens, mid-teens, I had to relearn religion. Wow. I had to relearn Christianity, but I had to relearn the Islamic version of it because there is an Islamic version and they're very close, but also very different. And we would go to the mosque and they asked me if I wanted to wear the hijab. And I was just like, why? I don't have beautiful hair and I'm 13. Who am I turning on? I was like, no, Yeah. And then from there, I, as an adult, practiced Buddhism. So I moved to Buddhism. So I have 3 major religions in me. And as I was writing No Heaven for Good Boys, I was extremely cognizant that I was writing the other. I'm Black, Africans are Black, but I am not Senegalese. I am African American, but I am not African. And I call Africa my home, but I am still writing the other because I grew up here in like Boston, Massachusetts, and New York. And on my mother's side, they're from Honduras, so I have cultural influences coming from Central America. And so it was vital, so important that I honor and respect a religion that I don't practice, and that I honor and respect women and men and children with whose culture invited me in, but whose culture I do not own. Hopefully that's a good answer.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Yes. The next question is from Wandi Bethune on Facebook. Mm-hmm. And Wandi wants to know when Ahmed and his mother have this back and forth, almost killing each other. So this is Marabu Ahmed.
Yes.
Can you add the backstory to that?
So, one of the things that I believe, and this is just my own belief, is that women are powerful. Women are strong. Black women are strong, African women are strong, women of color, like women are strong, like don't mess with us. And, you know, his mother knows that there is a problem with Ahmed, with her son. But she goes along with it, right? And when she sees, and his wife is aware that there's something off with him. And she tries to keep her boys away from him, right? And there is a scene between Ahmed and his own son, his youngest son, that is inappropriate. And the mother, his mother, Ahmed's mother, witnesses it. And it's just like, you know, I need to put my foot down. Like, because this is not going on again while I am alive. And he tries to, you know, she exerts her power over him and he tries to hurt her and then realizes that he cannot. He is not more powerful than she is. And I think that also goes along with my belief that matriarchs, like our elders, are to be respected. And that's really what that scene and her representation is. You know, respect our elders. They are to be respected. And in that case, she's just like, I'm more powerful than you. So hopefully.
That really came through. It's interesting because it's sort of like you interrogate tradition and yet you celebrate the elder. And so there's like a tension between sort of like blindly following certain aspects of tradition, but also this like strong celebration, which I think your book is really rich in all of those sort of tensions. And there's we only have time for one more question. And this question is, why did you pick your first book to be about your experience in Africa? And I want to like fold it into, fold another question into that, which someone else asked is, what are you working on next?
Okay. I decided to, you know, pursue my writing full time. The first book I ever wrote was about two young Black girls in the South, actually. And when I took a little time off from it and then went back to reread it, to revise it, I realized it was overwritten and it wasn't a great written book. You know, I think it was a great idea. And then as I was free writing, the Taliban came to me, you know? And I absolutely believe that this is actually the second book I ever wrote in my life, right? The first book was my training wheels, but I believe that the Taliban represent vulnerable children everywhere. I grew up as a marginalized child, poverty, food insecurity, poor, and abuse, you know. And so, the Taliban just never left me. And living in Senegal was just so rich and such a part of me that I believe that this had to be my first book, because this journey was also really hard to get to this point and have this book out. And there were so many times I wanted to give up. But the reason why I didn't is because the Taliban are still in Dakar right this moment. They are still living this reality in the book right this moment. And so I couldn't give up, because how dare I give up when they don't even have the opportunity to? So I absolutely believe that No Heaven for Good Boys got me here. Like the Taliban got me here. I didn't get them here, you know? And what I'm working on now is I have drafts of 2 other books already done, because I'm a type, you know, I try not to be type A. But I'm like, what am I doing? Let's just continue to write. So one is a memoir. And then the other one is fiction, a novel and stories about a young Black American guy trying to find his way in the world. I love him. I love all my characters like real people, just to let you know. And that's cool that I have all these imaginary friends because I'm a writer, so I can get away with that. And then I have three other projects that I'm working on. One is a dystopian world, one is sci-fi, and one is me trying to, sometimes I try to answer questions, and some of those questions are like, what's going on in this relationship? I try to understand like my exes.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, so like that one's really fun, and that project approaches fiction. So how am I doing this? It's nonfiction that I'm writing, but I interlace it with fiction. So it's doing the opposite of what No Heaven does. And that's a really interesting experience to give myself the opportunity to write nonfiction, but incorporate fictionalized and magic realism into it. So,
well, we could keep doing this. Keisha Bush, everyone, applause.
And thank you everyone for coming.
Yeah, please purchase No Heaven for Good Boys. It is a stellar read. I think everyone's going to enjoy it. And that's it from us.
Well, I just want to say a quick thank you to you both on behalf of the Strand for a wonderful hour. I cannot wait to read the book. Thoroughly entertained the entire time. Thank you both so much. I've dropped, for those of you watching, purchase links for both authors' books in both the chat and on the Facebook comment thread. So do feel free to get a copy if you'd like to, or if you haven't already. And on that note, thank you everyone and have a great evening.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you so much.
Bye.